Win McNamee/Getty Images CNN, President Donald Trump will tote his America First stance this week to the United Nations General Assembly, the annual inundation of diplomats and world leaders who this year await the new U.S. leader with uneasy anticipation. The summit in Trump's hometown, New York City, has become the quickest-paced diplomatic event on the calendar for an American president. Trump arrives to the soaring, green-hued Assembly Hall facing open questions about his approach to hot-button issues like climate change and the Iran nuclear accord. His schedule over 4 days is stacked with one-on-one talks with foreign counterparts eager to discuss those global flashpoints, as well as the deepening standoff with North Korea. The centerpiece, however, comes Tuesday during Trump's first UN address, a landmark foreign policy moment at the 8-month mark of his presidency. Once deeply critical of the UN, right down to its iconic emerald marble, Trump as president has achieved his principal diplomatic wins at the body's Security Council, which has passed waves of sanctions on North Korea. Trump remains skeptical, however, of the UN's efficacy or its value to the United States. Adhering to tradition? For Trump, Tuesday's speech and the ensuing flurry of diplomacy presents an opportunity to more fully articulate a global agenda that has confounded allies and foes alike. The world is still trying to take the measure of this president, said John Alterman, senior vice president at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. For a number of leaders, this is going to be their first chance to see him, to judge him, to try to get on his good side. They will have been preparing for a chance encounter for weeks. Administration officials say Trump is unlikely to unload on the UN in the way he has in the past. Instead, the president's aides are preparing an address that largely adheres to tradition by rallying countries behind condemnation of rogue regimes like North Korea and Iran. Speaking Friday, Trump's top national security aides previewed a UN message centered on themes of accountability and sovereignty over the course of Trump's 4 days in New York. The president hopes to relay the message that countries must become more responsible for their own security while signaling the days of U.S. lecturing over issues like human rights are ending. He slaps the right people, he hugs the right people, and he comes out with the U.S. being very strong in the end, Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, said in a preview of Trump's remarks. He will urge all states to come together to address grave dangers that threaten us all, added H.R. McMaster, the White House National Security Advisor. Since taking office, Trump has dug rifts with allies on climate change and trade. But he's also spoken inconsistently on those issues, fostering a degree of confusion over his stance by issuing vague and sometimes contradictory statements. In most areas, however, Trump has demonstrated a level of restraint on executing the types of foreign policy shifts that he promised when running for office. He followed the Pentagon's advice to send additional troops to Afghanistan, despite the urging from some of his conservative advisors to pull out entirely. He has postponed, at least for now, moving the American embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a campaign promise that would upend his efforts to broker a peace agreement in the region. And he has yet to discard the Iran nuclear deal, though he is considering steps to weaken it, potentially as early as this month. That issue is expected to dominate parts of Trump's agenda this week, including talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday. Iran's leader, Hassan Rouhani, addresses the UN body on Wednesday. Speed dating from hell in New York, Trump will spend the evenings at Trump Tower, his longest stretch at home since taking office in January. He'll be joined on the trip by Haley, Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, each of whom will maintain their own schedules of talks. Tillerson has mandated the State Department reduce its footprint at the General Assembly this year, part of a broader effort to streamline the agency's activities. The centerpiece diplomatic event is seen as a test of Tillerson as his standing in the administration comes under scrutiny. Like most years, some major world leaders are sending envoys to the General Assembly instead of attending themselves. China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin are both remaining at home, as is German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who faces re-election next weekend. But Trump will still convene talks with more than a dozen world leaders over the course of his 4-day stay in New York. He will meet individually with the leaders of France, Israel, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, the United Kingdom, Egypt, Turkey, Afghanistan, and Ukraine.